Okay, now let's look at some terminology of the fetus in utero. The first is fetal lie. The lie is the orientation of the long axis of the fetus and the long axis of the uterus. The most common lie is longitudinal. Here we have a fetus in longitudinal lie. The long axis of the baby is the same as the mother. This is transverse lie. Now, transverse lie babies will not be delivered vaginally unless they are really, really premature. 99% of babies are longitudinal lie. Next, we look at presentation. The presentation is the portion of the fetus that overlies the pelvic inlet. The most common presentation is head down. We call that cephalic presentation. Here we have cephalic presentation. The head is down. And here we have breech presentation. The butt is down. Both of these babies are longitudinal lie. Breech presentation can be three different ways. You can have a footling, frank breech, complete breech. Which of these, if you're going to do a vaginal delivery, would be a possibility for vaginal delivery? The frank breech. The footling has the legs and the thighs extended. The frank breech has the thighs flexed and the knees extended. And the complete breech has both the thighs and the knees flexed. The complete breech is often called an unstable breech, because if it decides to put its feet down, it can become a footling breech. The frank breech is not going to change, and this is why it would be a possibility, although uncommon today, for a vaginal delivery. If you have a stargazing breech, this baby should not be tried for vaginal delivery because the head is hyperextended and the head must flex in order to have a delivery. The position. Position defines the relationship of a definite fetal part to the maternal bony pelvis. The position will vary from early to late labor. In early labor, the baby is transverse, and left occiput transverse is the most common. At delivery, occiput anterior is the most common. We use as the landmarks the fetal head, and the occiput is here with the triangular-shaped posterior fontanelle. In terms of the mother's bony pelvis, this is anterior and this is posterior. This is what you see in your notes. This is the occiput, posterior fontanelle, anterior fontanelle. What we're going to look at is the orientation of the occiput. Is it occiput anterior, right occiput transverse, right occiput posterior, and so on. Here we have the occiput here, and it is anterior. Now watch carefully as I move it around. Right occiput anterior, right occiput transverse, right occiput posterior, posterior, left occiput posterior, left occiput transverse, and can you see how it's rotating? Now this baby, all of these are longitudinal lie. They are all cephalic presentation, but they are rotating around. And this is going to be important in what we call the cardinal movements of labor as we talk about it later on. Because the fetus will start labor in a transverse orientation, and it will rotate internally to anterior. Now, depending on what the position is of the baby, you will have different degrees of molding of the head. And this is classic occiput posterior. And here we have a baby who has a molded head. You can see how similar these are. This goes away after 24 to 48 hours. Here is your occiput posterior molding of the head. Okay, now we move from position to attitude. Attitude has to do with the degree of extension and flexion of the fetal head. The most common attitude is the head is flexed, the chin is against the chest, and we call this vertex. Here we have a vertex. The chin is against the chest. As the head starts to extend, we have military, we have brow, and we have face. Notice the head is flexed. Military, the head is straight, like a soldier who is standing at attention. I want you to notice the diameter of the head when it is flexed, the diameter when it is military. It takes more space, a wider diameter for a military. And so what will typically happen is a military will convert to a vertex. This looks at increasing extension of the head and maximal extension of the head. The brow and the face. Notice the wider diameter of the brow and the narrower diameter of the face. A brow attitude will typically convert to a face. Vertex, military, brow, face. Now we move to station. And station is an expression of the degree of descent of the presenting part. And we talk about centimeters above or below the maternal ischial spine. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Let's look. This is a bony pelvis. This is the ischial spine on one side, the ischial spine on the other. An imaginary line drawn between these is zero station. Here you can see the ischial spine. This is zero station. We can look then at a line drawn between the ischial spines as zero. If the fetal head is above, we call this a -1, -2, -3. If the head has dropped down below the mid-pelvis, we call it +1, +2, +3. This is all assessed by proprioception. You don't have a ruler. You can't take a picture. This is all by feel. This diagram looks at -5, at +5, but it's basically the same idea. It is an expression of the degree of descent of the presenting part as it moves through the pelvis. The last part of this section on fetal orientation in utero is syncretism. This is a hard concept to get, but I think the pictures may help. Syncretism talks about the parallelism between the planes of the fetal head and of the maternal pelvis. Now this is a baby that did not come down synclitic. See how the molding of the head is off to the side. It should actually be straight on. This baby's head was cocked off to the side. We call this syncretism. As the head comes through the pelvis, the midline should be in the middle of the pelvis. The middle line of the head, the sagittal suture, and the pelvis should be the same. Now look what happens. This is called a posterior asyncretism. And where will the molding then be? Down here, off to the side. And that's what happened with this baby. This is an anterior asyncretism. And you can see that the molding is going to be on the other side of the head in this situation. If the head is asynclitic, even though the baby's not too big, you may very well have an obstructed labor, a failure to push the baby out, and she will require a cesarean. And that is the end of asyncretism.